Hi, Gary Mrozinski back again to continue our work on Chapter 3. We've talked about the law of demand and the demand curve. We've talked about the law of supply and the supply curve. Now it's time to bring them together on the same graph and figure out how the market price is determined and how it changes. So you can see in this graph that the intersection is the equilibrium point. So at that equilibrium point, there is a P sub E on the y-axis, that's the equilibrium price or the market price. And on the x-axis, there is the equilibrium quantity or the equilibrium output of this industry. That is equilibrium. So that's the equilibrium point. There's no shortage, there's no surplus. The quantity supplied is in perfect balance with the quantity demanded. And we're going to talk about why the market wants to be in equilibrium and what changes the market price. The market price does not stay the same, right? So what makes the market price change? What happens is something happens to shift either the demand curve or the supply curve. An increase in overall demand, an increase overall supply, or a decrease in either one of those two. And oftentimes it's more than one thing happening at once. But when one of the supply curves shifts, there's a new intersection point and a new market price. So let's talk about how that works exactly. Suppose, looking at this graph, you had a demand curve. Pick out P sub high. See that? P sub high on the y-axis. Follow that across to the point where it intersects with the supply curve. Imagine that the demand curve was actually positioned there, intersecting at that point, where P sub high is intersecting with the supply curve. See it? Imagine the demand curve were there, to the right of where it appears on this graph. Then something happens to decrease overall demand and shift the demand curve to the position you see it in now, right? What would happen if the price did not adjust? Or actually, what I'm going to try to explain to you is why is it the price actually does adjust? Well, if the price sticks where it was, P sub high, then what's the situation? That's really an artificially high price, right? Because we can see there's a new intersection point that's lower, but imagine that the price did not change. By the way, who changes the price of a product? It's not the buyer, right? It's the seller. But the seller is changing the price of his or her product based on changing market conditions. That's what we're trying to figure out here. What would be the market conditions? So the demand curve has shifted to the left, decrease in overall demand, but the price is still stuck at P sub high. What is the current situation? Well, follow that price, go horizontally and see where it intersects with the demand curve, and then come down to the x-axis, that's Q sub D, right? At that price, the quantity demanded is identified as Q sub D. Now follow that across and see where it intersects with the supply curve, and then come down to the x-axis, that's Q sub S, right? At that artificially high price, the quantity supplied is much greater than the quantity demanded. Sellers want to sell more of this product than buyers want to buy at that artificially high price. So if you're one of these sellers, what are you feeling? Well, you have an inventory full of product. There's not enough buyers for it. Your inventory keeps getting larger and larger. And so you think, I have to get rid of this inventory. Let's lower the price. You will lower the price and other suppliers will do the same thing. Maybe you lower it just a little bit, maybe halfway between P sub high and P sub E. Well, that would result in a smaller surplus, but still a surplus. And so again, you would see that you're selling more, but still you have too much inventory. You would eventually lower your price to the point where you could sell all that you're supplying to the market, sell all that you're producing. Eventually, and other buyers are doing the same thing. This happens over time. Eventually, the price would get down to P sub E. And you have a new equilibrium point now. Q sub B is the output of the market. On the other hand, what if something else happens? Imagine that the demand curve, find P sub low on the y-axis. See it there? Now follow across horizontally to where it intersects with the supply curve. Imagine that the demand curve were intersecting there. And then something happened to increase overall demand in this market. And it shifts to the position it's currently in. Again, let's think about why is it the price will adjust? Well, imagine that it does not adjust. Imagine that it's still stuck at P sub low. At a price of P sub low, follow horizontally to where it intersects with the supply curve and drop down to the x-axis, Q sub S. That would be the quantity supplied by sellers at that artificially low price. It's much lower than the quantity that would be demanded by buyers at that artificially low price. Again, follow P sub low horizontally until it intersects with the demand curve and then drop down to the x-axis, Q sub D. So the quantity demanded would be much greater than the quantity supplied at this case. So that is a shortage. There's a shortage in the market. So imagine that happens and you're one of the sellers. Remember, sellers are the ones that change the price of the product in response to changing market conditions. In this case, what are you feeling? How do you know there's a shortage? Sellers don't really have these graphs in front of them. They are just feeling what they're feeling based on the customers they see coming in their doors if it's a retail store. So if you're a retail store in this situation, you're finding out that there's a line to buy your product and the line goes out the door and down the street and you have nothing in inventory. As fast as you're able to get the product, produce it, it's being sold. There is a shortage. So what would you do? You're likely to raise the price of your product. So you would do that. Maybe you raise it to halfway between P sub low and P sub E. Okay, now what's the situation? Well, still there's a line to buy your product, a line of customers, but maybe it's not as long of a line. It doesn't go out the door and down the street. It just goes to the door, something like that. Still, you can't satisfy all consumer demand at that artificially low price. You're likely to raise the price. And other sellers are doing the same thing. So gradually, eventually, the price is going to rise to the point where you're at P sub E and the quantity supplied at that price is in balance with the quantity that is demanded at that price. This is why the price adjusts. And again, this is the beauty of the market system. The market mechanism will allow for the price to adjust so that it eliminates the imbalance, either the shortage or the surplus. This is the market system economy. And this is just explaining what I just talked about, how the market mechanism adjusts the price to eliminate either the surplus or the supply. In these next 4 slides, you'll see that we're being shown a shift in a curve, and you can see what the resulting change to the equilibrium price or market price would be. In this case, there's an increase in overall demand, and look at what happens to the intersection. Well, in terms of price, this causes the market price to rise, doesn't it? An increase in overall demand, other things equal, the supply curve is stationary in this example, makes the market price rise. And that makes sense, right? If consumers want more of this product, then that leads to an increase in overall demand. That raises the market price. In this case, this is a product that consumers don't want as much. There's a decrease in overall demand that happens. The demand curve shifts from D1 to D2. What happens to the market price? It goes from P1 to P2. It goes down, right? Just as we would expect. Now in this example, you can see something happened in this market to increase overall supply of the product. A good local example here in Pennsylvania would be the natural gas industry. The natural gas market has experienced this kind of a shift in the last 10 to 15 years due to technological advance. The technology used to produce natural gas. We have these shale rock formations in Pennsylvania, which is a very soft rock, which often has natural gas trapped in it. The technology that was found to be feasible about 10, 12 years ago in western Pennsylvania initially was the combination of hydraulic fracking or fracking, hydraulic fracturing, which is where a hydraulic fluid is used to break apart the rock, releasing the natural gas, and horizontal drilling, which is where you can go down as far as 1 mile and then turn 90 degrees and go horizontally up to 2 miles. Now, the benefit there is you don't have to penetrate the earth as many times if you can just go down one time and then go laterally in any direction such a distance. So these two technologies combined were found to be effective in drilling and producing natural gas at a lower cost than previously. So this increases overall supply of natural gas. All suppliers, all natural gas drillers want to produce more at any given market price. And look at what happened to the market price. This is exactly what happened. Lowered the market price for natural gas. Following the same example, remember I told you that our Governor Wolf, favors adding an extraction tax on natural gas drillers, or the energy companies that hire the drillers to produce the natural gas. Again, the industry's argument against this tax is that it's going to make it more costly per unit to produce natural gas. This will shift the supply curve to the left and harm the consumer. Of course, they're going to say it's all about the consumer. We're concerned with the consumer. That's why you shouldn't be taxing us. It's going to raise the market price. Well, remember, we say other things equal, this will be the effect. And remember, I told you at least one time so far that it's not just one thing that's happening in any given market. It's more than one thing. So the debate is, we had that rightward shift due to this new production technology. There will be a leftward shift if we add the tax, but relative to the rightward shift, the increase in overall supply, how large will the decrease in overall supply be? It may still end up with lower market prices than before. We don't know, but that is what gets debated because there's more than one shift happening at any one time. But if the only thing you do is add the tax on producers, it will shift the supply curve to the left, making the market price rise. And you can see that when one of these curves shifts, you have disequilibrium. There are two forms of disequilibrium, either a surplus or a shortage. The price will eventually adjust to eliminate the imbalance or the disequilibrium, and we'll be back in equilibrium. So here are our 3 questions, which we're in a better position to answer now that we're through most of Chapter 3. What gets produced in a market system economy? The goods and services that are most desired and most profitable to produce, which is led by consumer demand. How do they get produced? Well, there's pressure to produce at the lowest possible per unit price, which sometimes means using the latest technology that's available or even developing it yourself. There will be pressure to do that in a market system economy because if you're not doing that and your competitors are, you're at a disadvantage. And then who gets the output? Whoever is willing and able to purchase it at the current market prices. Now there are 2 types of efficiency, which I've already touched on, but here they are on one slide. This becomes a really big deal in the microeconomics class. We really start to discuss 4 different types of market structures, how productively efficient the market is, and how allocative efficient the system is. So let's just sort of summarize these. Productive efficiency. This one's pretty easy to understand. With the market system economy, you will have more productive efficiency than you'll have with, say, the command system economy, communism. Why is that? Well, because there's going to be more competition with the market system economy. With communism, if there are 5 major automobile manufacturing plants in the economy, they all feel like they're on the same team. they're all government manufacturers. They don't really feel like they're competing with each other. There's no incentive to or pressure to lower production costs. With the market system economy, where there is more competition, there is pressure to lower your per unit cost to become more productively efficient. And overall, there will be more productive efficiency the more competition there is in any given market. Now, allocative efficiency has to do with the overall system. And again, I'm going to talk about the market system economy. If a given product market is experiencing an increase in overall demand, so that means that buyers want more of it, overall demand is increasing, that drives up the market price, right? We just proved that. When that happens, suppliers, sellers will be more profitable than before. That's going to attract the notice of producers of other products that produce other products in other markets. If some other product, especially if it's a related product, is more profitable to produce than the thing you're currently producing, you're going to shift the use of your productive resources to producing that other thing with the higher market price that's more profitable to produce. And resources, productive resources, factors of production, will flow into the market that consumers want more. So the market that has growing demand. And labor will flow into that market too, because there are now more producers of that product. They need more workers possibly. And if it's a product that's more profitable to produce than other products, then employers will be offering above average wages. And so the best resources are going to start to flow into that market, the labor resources, I mean. To the extent that the system, the economic system, is facilitating this flow of resources out of less profitable markets into more profitable markets, the system is allocatively efficient. What if the government does intervene? Price controls. Well, even in our economic system, the market system economy, there are a couple of cases where the government does intervene and not set prices, but set either a price ceiling or a price floor, which effectively is doing the same thing. So let's talk about what this will do. And here is, spoiler alert, it will cause an imbalance. Now, the first kind of price control would be a price ceiling. This is where the government places a maximum price on a product that sellers may charge, and this would be a price that is lower than the equilibrium price. So if the market were left to determine the market price, it would be higher than this price ceiling, right? So this happens in cases where it is believed that some people in society are being disadvantaged because they have a right to purchase this product but can't afford it because market prices would be too high if the equilibrium price were the market price, and so some lower price ceiling is imposed on sellers. And there's not many examples of this, but an example would be rent control. This happens in markets where real estate prices are rising, and this has the effect of increasing rental prices as well. And it may be that these are neighborhoods in New York City, let's say, where families have lived for generations and rents are increasing to the point that it's driving families out of those neighborhoods to some other part of the state because they can no longer afford to pay the rent. So if you think that this is a problem for society, you might impose a price ceiling on the apartment owners that are charging the rents, some maximum price. And let me go to the graph on the next slide. So this would be, ignore the prices because the prices would be much higher if it's a rental property. But imagine that this is like the price that can be charged per square foot, or for a 1,000 square foot apartment, let's say, per month, and there's some maximum price. Well, the equilibrium price is much higher. The now lower price ceiling, P sub C, results in an imbalance, right? At that lower price, look at where it intersects with the supply curve, and drop down to the x-axis, Q sub S, that's the number of apartments that will be on the market available for rental at that artificially low price, and the quantity demanded at that artificially low price will be way higher. That results in a shortage, right? And look at where we were. Imagine that this price ceiling was imposed on January 1st of the year. Well, prior to January 1st, there were more apartments on the market, weren't there, for rental? Look at the equilibrium point. Q sub 0 is how many apartments there were previously. Now that there's a price ceiling, there are actually fewer apartments available. Why is this? Well, if you're one of these apartment building owners, now some of them, now that you have to lower your rental price, some of them are going to decide to just leave the market. So you own this apartment building, maybe you decide to sell off the individual apartments as condominiums to individual owners and just leave that market. Some are going to do that. So who are the ones that stay? Well, here's another problem with rent control. It might be the shoddier apartments, and it's going to be maybe a disincentive to invest in upgrading these apartments now that you're getting less rental income, and so maintenance standards might actually decrease. And here's the bigger problem, though. There's a huge shortage. Who gets these apartments? There's a lot more interested renters than there are available apartments now. And there's no system in place to ration this shortage. So you could have, again, a lot of potential for disreputable apartment building owners to maybe use discrimination, maybe use nepotism to select who the renters are going to be, maybe even to sell some of this product on the black market. So the way it would work in this case would be, maybe I can only charge you $1,500 a month to rent this apartment, but if you give me $2,000 a month, $500 under the table, and don't tell anybody about it, I can guarantee that you're going to get one of these apartments. That would be like selling it on the black market. Of course, that's illegal, but there's potential and there's incentive to do that with this kind of a system. So there's all kinds of problems with this, and there's an imbalance then that is being imposed on this market. There's a disequilibrium. A price floor is where the government sets a minimum price that buyers have to pay for a product. And so who does this help? This helps the seller. This is done in cases where the actual market price would be so low, otherwise the equilibrium price is so low that producers of this product would not be profitable or not profitable enough, and it is believed that we should have more producers producing this product than otherwise would be the case if the market price were at the equilibrium price. And so assistance is given to the sellers by placing this price floor. But of course, this results in an imbalance as well. This is done in agricultural markets primarily, but also the minimum wage, which we'll talk about. That's a resource market. Imagine that this is the market for some agricultural product. The equilibrium price is $2 per unit. Maybe that's too low for sellers to be profitable. And so the government sets a price floor of $3 per unit. So that's an artificially high price. And at that higher price, you can see that the quantity demanded, see where that intersects with the demand curve, and then drop down to the x-axis, and then follow it across and see where it intersects the supply curve and drop down to the x-axis. The quantity supplied at that artificially high price would be much greater than the quantity demanded. Now the problem with agricultural products is, for the most part, they are perishable, that you can't just put them in inventory and try to sell them later. They will spoil. So in a lot of cases, what if it's dairy products, for example, the government then further subsidizes these industries by paying farmers not to produce. Have you ever heard about that? Because we don't want there to be a surplus that's stored somewhere that then gets spoiled. So these are the problems that you have with this kind of an imbalance, this type of disequilibrium when there's a surplus. This is a really interesting example of disequilibrium. Imagine that there were a market for organs, And let's just pick one of them. How about kidneys? What do you think the market price for a kidney would be if you were permitted to sell your kidney on the open market? And this is, of course, illegal in the United States. Can't do this. What do you think it would be? $100,000, $200,000, something like that? I'm not really sure. Let's just stop thinking about that altogether and think about the current situation. There is a price ceiling on the sale of organs, kidneys. The price ceiling is $0. It is illegal, right? Well, at a price of $0, the quantity supplied is almost zero. It's just whoever wants to donate their organs. It's very low, in other words, than it would be if sellers were able to sell their organs for a price $100,000, $200,000. But at a price of zero, the quantity supplied is going to be very small. The quantity demanded at that very low price is very, very high. And that is the current shortage that exists. Now, I am not advocating that we should be allowing people to sell their organs. I'm just explaining why there is such a shortage in the organ market. And that is it for Chapter 3. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you again soon.